According to feedingamerica.org, approximately 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food from every point in the food production cycle ends up in landfills and incinerators every year. Rescuing this perfectly edible whole food means feeding families facing hunger and taking a large step in protecting our planet and conserving our resources. Food waste in America has substantially grown, directly affecting both the environment and communities across the nation. Cooking and purchasing food is a cultural universal in all parts of the world. However, we have taken advantage of our surplus of food, creating a cultural particular by needlessly wasting food while contributing to environmental exhaustion. Its carbon footprint is estimated at 3.3 billion tons of CO2, equivalent of GHG released into the atmosphere per year. In terms of these greenhouse gas emissions, it is the most destructive type of household waste across America. So why is it still happening, and how can it be solved? We have become known as a throwaway society, with plastic, glass, and food being the largest contributing factors. Restaurants, schools, households, and other parts of our material culture contribute to this crisis, with 40 to 50% of waste coming from consumers and 50 to 60% coming from businesses and manufacturers. When shown this picture of green beans, it may be hard to tell why it is discarded. It's because the green beans are too short and have minor blemishes on the outside. A Second Harvest food bank in Tennessee works together with one of the country's largest green bean growers to rescue millions of pounds of green beans that are snapped or too short for grocery stores. They've established separate processing lines specifically for produce that would otherwise go unused and packaged it to be delivered to food banks across the area. This initiative has substantially benefited their local community in terms of food waste and hunger, showing that most of America's food waste can be combated through organizations such as this one. Overall, it has become increasingly imperative that we start reducing this waste and helping those facing hunger in our own community and around the world. We have collected an assortment of interviews and personal opinions from people in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, on how they work to reduce food waste in their own households and what they believe should be done to control this issue. We devised a series of questions to be answered by a random sample of people in the community. We first asked how many pounds of food were wasted per year in the U.S., and if that number was surprising to them. We then asked how often they buy produce, about what percentage is wasted from that produce, and if they feel that they buy more than needed when shopping. Lastly, we asked for their solutions to combat this issue and whether they were bothered by throwing away food. Our first stop was Target, where we interviewed an employee who was selling organic crackers and chips, and a random woman shopping around. Both had similar responses, saying that they waste about 10 to 15% of food per week and that they try to save food as much as possible until it is necessary to be thrown away. Their solutions including portion control, only making and eating the amount of food needed, and buying produce and other grocery items further away from their expiration date. After hearing their answers, we asked some teachers at CD the same questions to see if they had similar responses.
How many pounds of food do you think is wasted per year in the United States from all points of the food production cycle?
Oh my gosh, it must be unbelievable amounts. I have no idea. I wouldn't even try to guess, but it must be unbelievable amount. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, the answer would be 72 billion pounds of food.
I couldn't even, 72 billion pounds. Amazing.
Is that surprising to you, and if so, why?
Well, it is amazingly sad, and it doesn't surprise me because so often we're a consumer kind of nation, and we're pretty selfish about not taking care of things like we should.
How often do you buy produce per week in your household?
Once a week, usually, since it's just me in the household, currently.
And about what percent would you say is thrown away from this food?
From me? Nothing, because I try to eat strawberries and blueberries, right away.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you buy more than needed when food shopping?
No, not for one person.
And does it bother you if and when you have to throw food away?
Yes, it does, because you feel like, the farmers are out there producing it. There's so much energy that goes into production and selling and, the full food cycle. It's tough, I'm sure.
And lastly, Are there any solutions that you could propose to combat these issues in your own household?
I think I'm pretty good with just what I consume. So I guess I feel I'm pretty happy about how I try to deal with the food issue.
What about on like a grand, like worldwide scale?
Well, we're lucky because we have an overproduction and we're able to feed everyone that hopefully can, but we know that's an issue within our own population of the United States, and of course worldwide. When they don't have anything and there's war and strife, there's just sometimes no capability of having food. So it's a very, very, very serious problem worldwide, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. How many pounds of food do you think is wasted per year in the U.S. from all points of the production cycle?
About 3 billion pounds.
Okay, well the correct answer is 72 billion. Does that surprise you?
That does surprise me. That is a lot of waste
Why? Like, why does it surprise you?
because I thought it would be less.
How often do you buy produce per week?
Every week.
About what percentage would you say is thrown away from this produce?
I'd say about 20%.
Do you feel like you buy more when needed than when food shopping?
I feel like I buy more than I need when I go food shopping.
Thank you. Does it bother you when you have to throw wasted food away?
It does bother me because that's wasted money and it's also food that other people could eat.
And are there any solutions that you could propose to combat these issues in your own household?
Buy less food and donate whatever I don't think I'm going to use to a charitable organization.
Finally, we turned to Twitter to see what younger generations had to say about this issue. Our first question asked how many pounds of food are wasted each year in the U.S. Based on the 4 choices given, 14% said 98 million, 26% said 623 million, 31% said 72 billion, and 29% said 201 billion. Even though the correct answer of 72 billion won, there were still many votes for 623 million, which doesn't even begin to scrape the surface of the waste we produce. Our next question asked whether people are bothered when they must throw food away. 63% said yes, while 37% said no. Lastly, we asked who they believe is most at fault for this waste. 17% said schools, 21% said households, 55% said restaurants, and 7% said other. This question was the most surprising since businesses such as restaurants and households share almost equal responsibility in terms of food waste statistics. However, we continue to base our knowledge off a superior mentality, thinking that others hold responsibility when in fact we hold just as much, if not more. Based on the information we have gathered, it has become clear that people recognize this problem but are still searching for ways to solve it. Most people who wasted produce and non-perishable items said they often bought more than needed when grocery shopping. By preparing lists based on the correct amount needed for that week, composting food scraps instead of throwing them away, and ordering correct portion sizes, we can conserve energy and resources and money on the weekly grocery bill. People can also donate leftover food to food banks and other organizations to help those who may not be able to afford the necessary groceries for their family. Restaurants and schools can also aid families in need by donating leftover food and only buying the inventory needed for that week to reduce overall waste. Monitoring inventory may also help by focusing on the opportunities and efficiencies of cross-utilization. If an ingredient is being wasted or spoiled because enough of it isn't being used, restaurants can devise ways to integrate it into other dishes, which would lower the number of items in their inventory. Restaurants like Panera, Starbucks, and Olive Garden have already begun donating surplus and leftover food at the end of the work week, showing that it is indeed possible and can result in millions of pounds of donated food each year. By changing the norms of this throwaway society, we can focus more on aiding those in need around us by giving people more of a responsibility in how they handle food waste. By taking advantage of our current technological state, we can easily share our own values and beliefs about food waste with others and pass them down to future generations through social learning. Culture changes with discovery, invention, and diffusion, all of which have the opportunity to evolve in our own society. Our interviews concluded that many people weren't aware of this problem on a greater scale, leading them to discover something that has already existed for decades before today. Different businesses and organizations have created systems for donating food and handling waste on a daily basis, while countries like France have already enacted laws which ban supermarkets from throwing away food by donating instead. In Denmark, a new waste supermarket was established which sells surplus food at discounted prices, drawing in crowds from around the area. The last step in our journey is diffusion, by borrowing these countries' methods of reducing food waste and the chance that it would lessen our own. It is imperative that we heighten our efforts to reduce this waste, starting with our own community and most importantly, ourselves.